It's a priority bill for the lieutenant governor. What inspired you to put it forward?
Well, U.S. elections are for U.S. citizens. That's not a radical concept for most people, but do you realize that right now, when you register to vote, there's no requirement that you show proof of your citizenship. In Texas, to get a driver license, you show proof of your citizenship. That's been the law for years. But to register to vote, the federal government will not allow us to require proof of citizenship. Now, there's legislation in Congress to try and fix this. We hope they pass that, but we're not waiting on Washington. That's our theme. We are not waiting on Washington. We can fix this locally. So Senate Bill 16 looks at the current Supreme Court law, looks at what other states have done, and it provides a way for Texas to require proof of U.S. citizenship when you register to vote. It's not too much to ask that only U.S. citizens are voting in U.S. elections. It's a big deal.
Now, I do want to ask you, it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. There are some exceptions for local elections. With that being said, do you still feel this law is necessary?
We do. Every year, as we do voter roll maintenance, we go through the voter rolls and find where people have passed away, or people have moved, or people are felons and shouldn't be registered to vote. We also find non-citizens on our voter rolls. It happens every year. Now, whether they registered accidentally or intentionally, they are on the voter rolls and they are registered to vote. And so this is real. This happens. We don't know how widespread it is, but we know that one non-citizen voting in an election is a problem. That cancels out the vote of a citizen. Again, voting in U.S. elections is for U.S. citizens. As you say, some states have allowed non-citizens to vote in city elections. That is not happening in Texas, but we want to make sure it's not happening.
And I do want to go, further into that because the reports of fraud, election fraud nationwide are very, very, very tiny. We're talking thousands of a percentage point. So do you know how many non-citizens are on the rolls here in Texas? Is it a number that is significant in your view?
It's a great question. If we talk about election fraud broadly, we used to hear folks say, well, there's no evidence of election fraud. So then we presented evidence of election fraud. And then they said, well, there's no evidence of widespread election fraud. And then we presented evidence of widespread election fraud. And then they just resorted to calling us names and things like that. The fact is, non-citizens have been discovered on the voter rolls in Texas just about every time we have updated the list. It's real. We know what's happening. We also know that people have been prosecuted who were not U.S. citizens who voted in U.S. elections. There was a pretty famous case in Tarrant County, one in Harris County. Again, this is a non-citizen registered to vote and voted in a Texas election. So this is real. And so we're going to take it seriously.
I do want to ask you, how do you define widespread fraud? Because that definition does differ from person to person. So I just want to get your opinion on that.
If you were the voter who was disenfranchised, if you're the disabled voter, the elderly voter, the limited English voter, the first-time voter, if you're the one who was cheated, who was disenfranchised, whose ballot was stolen from your mailbox, or who had someone come to your home claiming to be from the government and took your vote from you, if you're that person, it's a big deal. How much fraud is enough? How much is okay? How much voter fraud should we allow? I don't think that's the right question to ask. We want to make voting easy and cheating hard. Easy to vote, hard to cheat. And that's what we're going to keep pushing for.
It's just my question, because the reports of fraud, there is no evidence of widespread fraud in Texas or in other states. So, you still feel as though this law would change that?
Well, how much fraud is okay? What does widespread mean? If someone is depriving a Texan of their right to vote, or if someone who is not a citizen is voting, or any other violation where a voter is misled, where their ballot by mail is taken from their mailbox, where someone comes to their house claiming to be officially from the government, but in fact is a paid campaign worker trying to mislead that voter. That's never okay. And we're not going to let that happen. We're going to pull this up by the roots.
And similar to 1026, I just want to make clear, are you looking to change the consequences for violating this law and this bill, or it would just require a proof of citizenship? The consequences themselves do not change.
That's exactly right. Senate Bill 16 requires proof of citizenship to register to vote in Texas. So it's at the point of registration. If this bill is implemented, it's going to prevent a lot of these problems downstream. We won't have to worry about penalties or about what the crime is, because we can prevent it by requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote.
And some may say that this bill, targets certain communities who may not easily be able to access a proof of citizenship document. I want to get your response to that.
We had the same arguments about 10, 15 years ago when we put in place the requirement that one show proof of citizenship to get a driver license. This ground has been plowed. Anyone who has a driver license in Texas today showed proof of citizenship when they got that driver license. So that this has already been done. Folks are familiar with the process. We just need the feds out of the way to let us put this in place.
How confident are you Senate Bill 16 will pass?
Senate Bill 16 will pass the Senate, I believe, very quickly. I'm optimistic it will pass the House. I know that our East Texas delegation supports it, and I hope the whole House will, or at least a majority.